Hello there friends and welcome. For today's very special video, let us finally talk about the Aeon Mythic path, with everything you need to know, including the best unique mythic abilities, Aeon Mythic spells, and of course a very fun Aeon build I have prepared too. I was actually surprised by how fun and powerful Aeon was overall. It actually has a lot of unique story events, and some of the writing when interacting with your Aeon self is, to put it simply, very different than the rest. And I really was not expecting it to be so powerful gameplay wise as well. You can not only highly increase the attack bonus and damage of your entire party when combining some super powerful GAZES together, to the point where you can easily hit everything, even on unfair, without having to rely on domain powers and short duration buffs, while also combining the strongest dispel potential possible in the entire game, to the point where every single one of your attacks will attempt to dispel every single buff the enemies have, including bosses on unfair. So without further ado, let us get started on our Aeon Mythic Path guide, first with how the special Aeon abilities work and what are the best ones. After that, I'll cover the special Aeon spells, and then our Aeon build of course. Alright, so let's start with the main Aeon Mythic Path ability, your GAZES. First with how they work. At 3rd level and then at every other mythic level, you'll get to pick a new gaze. At the start you only have these ones available, but as soon as around mythic 4 and 5, you'll get an expanded selection. It has limited uses of 1 plus your mythic rank times per day. So at mythic rank 3, you would be able to use your Aeon gaze 4 times. Activating them costs only a free action. This means you can instantly activate them at the very start of battle, at basically no cost, because you still retain the ability to make full attacks, move, and even cast spells, all at the same round. And also use swift actions too. They will last for the entire battle, and are pretty versatile in that they have 2 effects. The first one is a main buff to your characters based on the one you pick. At the same time, it will also attempt to debuff the enemy with a similar penalty. So the attack rolls gaze will buff your character's AB while also reducing the enemies. The debuffing part is more of a bonus, but it can be quite powerful depending on the gazes you pick, especially since the difficulty class can become quite high eventually, so quite respectable even for unfair. Plus chaotic demons also have a penalty to their saving throws against your gaze effects. At the very start you'll only be able to turn on a single Aeon gaze per battle. However, at mythic 6 it will upgrade into 2. Then becoming 3 at mythic rank 10. Kinda sad because by then there's not much content left. Another very nice boost is that starting from mythic rank 8, your gazes will also get unlimited uses, which means you can then pretty much turn them on every single battle. Now let's get into what you're really interested in probably, the best gazes and what they do. I'll start with attack because, to be fair, this is pretty much the most useful gaze for almost all of the playstyles. The beauty about the gaze effects is that they buff your whole party, it's not just your main character, by 1 plus 1 per 2 mythic ranks. This is actually an untyped sort of boost to AB, which means it stacks with everything else, part of what makes it so powerful. As I mentioned before, it will also attempt to debuff the enemy's attack rolls by the same amount, so can also work as, let's say, an indirect way of increasing your character's armor class. A second interesting gaze, and this is one for more spellcasting focused parties, is the Save DC, which boosts the DC of your spells by 1 plus 1 per 3 mythic ranks. While this can help, spellcasters, the problem is, I imagine most parties in the game will actually be focused on melee or ranged attacks overall. At most you'll have spellcasters for buffing spells, and usually just like a single character for DC spells, usually the main character. This is why I say the attack rolls gaze is overall more efficient. After all, it hits your whole party, there's not much of a point into increasing the DC of, let's say, a melee ally or a pet, it doesn't matter for them. Now, starting from mythic rank 5, you'll actually get more gazes to pick from. As far as the second best pick, honestly, Attacks of Opportunity wins by far here. It works exactly as the Ever Ready mythic ability, so your whole party will get an extra attack bonus and also damage for every mythic rank you have, a maximum of plus 10, whenever making Attacks of Opportunity. Note that this gaze actually scales way better than almost all of the other ones, because it is 1 per mythic rank, and since just like attack gaze, it is a non-typed boost, stacks with everything, and here's the best part, including with the Ever Ready mythic ability. So when you combine both of them, your whole party, well, besides your pets that can get Ever Ready as a mythic ability, will acquire up to a +20 stacking boost to their attack rolls and their damage when making attacks of opportunity. If you've already watched some of my guards, then you know attacks of opportunity are the way to go. It's super easy to get loads and loads of them by just having high critical range weapons like falchions, scimitars, kukris, rapiers, with the improved critical feat, and also the outflank teamwork feat. Because of how extremely buffed our attacks of opportunity will be, when you combine the gaze with Ever Ready, enemies will just be destroyed. There's nothing that can survive this. Even on Unfair, I was easily able to destroy bosses like Baphomet and the Scary with but one character getting a critical hit. Now, since this is the Aeon Mythic guide, I might as well cover the other gazes that can be useful to you, but nothing will be better than attack and attacks of opportunity gaze stacked together. An interesting part about the Aeon gazes is some of them have pretty unique uses, even if they aren't the most optimal. Caster level, for example, can increase your caster level, which can help when it comes to hitting enemies with certain spells that are based on CL, like for example Hellfire Ray. Although most of the great spells that scale beyond level 20 are the merged Aeon and LICH ones. Combat maneuvers can help your pets into tripping the enemy more often, but I think it's a bit overkill and unnecessary. Concentration and area effects are kinda garbage overall. The same for energy shield and hit points, just skip them, the effects aren't really worth it. Damage reduction too. Normalized size might seem interesting at first, but I think it's kinda underwhelming. So it reverts all of your characters to medium size, removes the size penalties they might have, which is great. However, it also removes the reach bonus from size, and this, I'm afraid, is what seals the fate of this gaze. Reach is one of the most useful properties to have by increasing your size, because it gives your characters extra range. Power of Law has a pretty interesting effect. Basically, whenever you make an attack, skill or saving throw roll, and you get a result equal to or less than 1 plus half your mythic rank, the result will instead become 2 plus half your mythic rank. Honestly, the main use that I have found for this is to basically prevent misses that your characters would have by rolling a 1, which is a critical miss, no matter how high your saving throw and attack roll result would be. While you can just pick the Always a Chance mythic ability for the same purpose, well, it costs a mythic ability. Relativity of Space can be quite decent. All attacks against you and your allies will get a miss chance equal to 5% per mythic rank, so eventually 50. Meanwhile, whenever you would get a miss chance, it is reduced by 5% your mythic rank. Summoner's Gaze, on the other hand, will give a bonus similar to the Ascended Summons mythic ability. I suppose this is why I've heard people say that Aeons are great for summoning. It's just that I think it's very niche overall, like all of the other gazes besides the best ones I mentioned. Because I mean, would you rather buff your whole party or your summons? Lastly, we have the Damage Gaze, which is actually the one I would like to combine with Attack of Opportunity and attack rolls when you finally reach Mythic rank 10. It gives all allies a bonus to damage equal to 1 plus 1 per 2 Mythic ranks. It's not a huge increase to damage or anything, but it can help, especially when you consider critical hits. On the other hand, you might also considering combining both of these gazes here with Power of Law, if only to avoid the very annoying automatic failures when you roll a 1. Now, starting from Mythic rank 4, your Aeon will also get the extremely powerful Aeon BANE mythic ability. For a number of rounds per day equal to double your mythic rank, you can make any weapon you wield count as having the BANE quality, which means an extra +2 enhancement against all enemies, since this is a generic BANE, and also an extra +2d6 irresistible damage against them. Also a bonus to spell penetration, and here's the most overpowered part by far and what makes this so powerful. Every hit you make with your weapons, or spells even, will attempt to dispel effects from the target. When you first get this, it's just a normal dispel magic, which means every hit will try to dispel one effect the enemy has. If you have an Inquisitor class that already has the Bane ability, the rounds will stack. I don't think this is needed because there's no point in using your Aeon Bane against trash mobs, even on Unfair. It is the bosses that can truly go all out on buffs like the final boss. Or some of the tougher mid-boss tier encounters, usually 1 round or 2 rounds is all it takes to completely dispel and destroy your boss. Now, starting from Mythic rank 6, your Aeon Bane will improve. You get even more damage and a bonus to attack rolls. And here's the most important part. Every single hit you make will attempt to dispel every single buff the enemy has. I'm not kidding, there is no limit to this whatsoever. The normal Greater Dispel magic spell was actually nerfed to have a limit on the amounts you can dispel based on caster level. Improved Aeon Bane, however, still works at full power with just a single strike, and you try to dispel everything the enemy has. It is that overpowered. This is probably one of the most powerful mythic abilities in the entire game, by far. And consider that your Aeon does get pretty high boosts to the dispel check, based both on your character level and then with your mythic ranks added on top of that. It's just overwhelmingly powerful. Especially because remember, you have multiple attacks per round. And this alone can make Aeon one of the ultimate boss killers. Your Aeon Bane actually receives yet another final upgrade at Mythic rank 9. Now it will automatically dispel a single effect the enemy has, without a check, per attack. And you still retain, you know, the greater dispel part of dispelling everything with a check. Now as far as your mythic powers, another useful part of Aeon are your immunities. At Mythic rank 3, you'll become immune to poison, disease and confusion. Confusion is the most important part here, but you also gain a very high bonus against chaotic enemies to all of your saving throws equal to your Mythic rank, so a maximum of +10, quite a hefty amount. At Mythic 5, your immunities will improve to bleed, mind affecting effects, amazing, and also ability damage, great. Then at Mythic rank 7, it won't just affect you, your allies will also be granted immunity to poison, disease and confusion. While at Mythic 9, your party will also get immunity to mind affecting spells. Amazing as usually, mind affecting crowd control effects the enemies cast on you like confusion are super annoying. The final upgrade for your character comes at Mythic 10. You automatically roll 20 on both initiative rolls and saving throws against chaotic creatures, which is quite crazy. Plus your attacks and even spells will also automatically ignore any damage reduction, resistance and immunities the enemies might have. The only downside is, as usual, it comes super late at Mythic 10, at a point where there's like nothing left to fight. Alright, now let us talk about the Aeon Mythic spells. You get spells up to level 7, but the unique ones only come from level 2 onwards. I'll be blunt, some of the Aeon spells, especially the ones you get at level 5, 6 and 7, can be super powerful. The issue is, the other ones aren't really that great, especially the early ones, and it kinda takes forever to get the good ones. But at the very least, they'll be very good. Another unique part about Aeon that I haven't really found in any other Mythic path is that some of their spells actually cast as swift actions by default, which means you can immediately activate them as soon as your round comes, without casting time, and while still retaining the ability to cast another spell or your full attacks and even move. The first spell that stands out is Crystal Mind at level 2. You can cure basically all of the annoying mind-affecting crowd control abilities the enemies cast on you, while also granting the target further immunity to fear and emotion effects for 1 round per Mythic rank. Edict of Retaliation is the first swift spell you get, and it can be very powerful as a matter of fact, depending on your playstyle. Whenever the enemy affected by the spell attacks you, it will be dealt 1d6 plus half your caster level as untyped damage. Even if they cast a spell, they're also dealt damage. For some enemies like Playful Darkness that have a ton of attacks per round, it's kinda funny, but they end up killing themselves very fast. Especially since I'm using enough, the bonus from this will stack with other sources like Mark of Justice from Scylla. I suppose the only downside is you have to wait for the enemy to attack you, when in reality, depending on how powerfully buffed your party is, especially if you're Aeon GAZES, you kinda end up killing the enemy way before this would do reliable damage. But hey, it works. Equal Force is kinda underwhelming. It has very high duration and can reduce the penalty of your 3rd and 4th attacks. The problem is it actually reduces your attack rolls with your first 2 attacks by a -2, which I find very annoying. The level 3 special Aeon spells I find a bit disappointing. I suppose you can go for relativity if you want to haste yourself and slow the enemies. Level 4 Aeon spells is when I'd say they start getting really good. First we have Edict of Predetermination, as always a swift action as most edicts are, and you can make the target roll 11 on all the 20 rolls. I wouldn't really bother casting it on your actual party members because they pretty much block you from getting critical hits. On the enemies though, it can be quite powerful. It doesn't have a save, bypasses spell resistance like pretty much all the mythic spells, and forcing the enemy to roll 11 can actually highly contribute to the chances of them failing saving throws if you are a DC caster, fail to penetrate your ally's spell resistance, and of course highly reduces the chances of them hitting your characters with melee attacks or touch spells. Perfect Prediction will be your first really powerful Aeon buff. It grants a +2 insight bonus to any ally's armor class, which increases by +1 for every 6 caster levels. Being able to grant +5 or even +6 to your tank's armor class is super powerful, because the reality is the only other way you really have of doing this is the Foresight spell, which is capped at just +2 insight, and is also a level 9 spell, so takes forever to get. Or the Inspiring Command, but it's just half the effect pretty much. Be sure to cast this on all your paths or any tank you have. Uncertainty Principle can be good for your main character. The thing is, we aren't really tanking with our Aeon, at least not with the build I have prepared for this guide. For 1 round per caster level, you get a staple 50% miss chance. It's not an illusion source, so can't really be bypassed by Druseeing. For level 5, we first have Edict of Perseverance, which can pretty much suppress any crowd control effect on your allies. Zero State here, however, is the true star of the show, and also the ultimate Dispel ability in the entire game, no matter the Mythic path, even better than Lich's Corrupt Magic in a way. It affects any creature in a very big burst around your character, the yellow circle here, and will try to dispel every single effect the enemy has without a limit, unlike the nerfed Greater Dispel Magic, with a very high +10 boost to your Dispel check, which means you're pretty much always going to dispel everything. The only downside is, well, it also hits your allies, unless you move them away, which is kinda annoying and too much micromanagement in my opinion. Which is why for this build I went with Meta Magic and Selective Spell, as you'll later see. This way we can cast Zero State just at the enemies. Now you might not find this that needed, since as early as Mythic 6, your Aeon Bane will already let your weapon attacks dispel all effects the enemy have anyways per hit. But this is actually an area of effect, and can help a lot, at the very least for the first DLC, Inevitable Access, certainly on Unfair, where some enemy packs start super buffed, and they have the most OP stats ever. For level 6 we get one of our ultimate Aeon buffs, Edict of Impenetrable Fortress. As a swift action, you can grant any target invulnerability to any physical damage. Oh, I don't think it needs any saying. Making your character immune to physical damage, especially your tanks, is just insane. It can completely trivialize the heavy bruiser enemies like the Scary, even on Unfair. For caster enemies though, it's not going to do much. But I can't recall really any super powerful OP caster enemy besides the final boss, which we can easily dispel anyways as an Aeon. And speaking about spellcaster enemies, for them we have Freezing Nothingness. If the target fails the save, they'll be paralyzed, but we kinda don't care for that since we won't have high DC. However, even if they make the save, they'll get the Entangled condition and, here's the best part, be blocked from casting spells. Now the only true downside of this spell is that, unfortunately, it does not bypass spell resistance. I'm not sure why, since it is a mythic spell, but it's the way it is. On the other hand, remember that you can just outright dispel the super powerful spellcasting enemies with many buffs anyway, so they're marked for death regardless. At level 7 we get our ultimate spells, first with Edict of Invulnerability, which is a super OP version of the Impenetrable Fortress. As a swift action, we actually grant all of our allies both immunity to any physical damage, and also suppress any mental or physical debuffs they have. Another very unique ultimate Aeon spell is Perfect Form. I think it's kinda bugged because the spell name is missing here, but yeah, it's Perfect Form. You might have already heard about the spell. It can basically set all of your character's stats to the highest ability score. There are some limitations, however. First, it does not work on the main character, which is why it says ally here. So sadly, no getting 54 in every single one of our stats. The second limitation is that, at least as far as Charisma, it doesn't seem to work correctly. I'll explain. So let us cast it on Wojif, who has Dexterity at 44, his highest stat. All of his stats were actually correctly set to his Dexterity, so he has 44 even in Strength and Wisdom. That's a wise Wojif. Intelligence and Charisma too. Now let's try it on Social, who has 39 Wisdom. Everything is also 39. Now let's try it on Sila, who has 34 Strength. Charisma is actually what was counted as her high stat, unfortunately, which meant her Strength was reduced. Kind of a bummer. And I know it might say, oh, but it doesn't count buffs. Well, if that was the case, then Wojif definitely should not have ended with such high scores, because his Dexterity is also buffed from a Meal, Enhancement, Mutagen, even a Ratio. Lastly, let's try it on our pet, who has a very high 59 Strength. So we have 59 on all scores. Kinda crazy, but yeah, we are the fastest, most resilient, most intelligent, charismatic, and wise dog in the whole world. Would probably be kind of funny to see if we had a Brown Fur Transmuter, so we then like at 80 in our stats. Anyways, the end result is that it can make for a very powerful buff depending on your character. It's just a pity we cannot cast it on the main character themselves. Black Hole has pretty nice animation, but we aren't really a DC character, so it's kinda useless for us. Alright, now let's get into the build I have picked for my Aeon guide. I'll be blunt, the one I prefer above all others is Hunter and then Divine Hound. For starters, we get full scaling judgments, the best ones by far being Justice for AB, Destruction for damage, and Protection for armor class. Plus, thanks to the Everlasting Judgment mythic ability, as early as mythic rank 1, which should come at level 5 or 6, your character will have infinite uses of your judgments, which means you can activate them on every single battle, starting with 1, then 2 at level 8, and even up to 3 at the same time at level 16. And here is the best part, Divine Hound also gets a pet for free at level 1, and your judgment will also automatically be applied to your pet whenever you activate it. Hunters also get free teamwork feats, and starting from level 3 they automatically share them with your pet, which is great too, as it frees up some space for your pet's feat progression. Plus, and here's one of their most unique abilities, they can get outflank as early as level 2. By level 3, both your character and your pet will already fully benefit from outflank. Lastly, Hunters are also spontaneous spellcasters based on wisdom. They can cast up to level 6 spells, and their spell list is actually quite powerful for the early spells, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I will guide you when it comes to the best ones through the build progression section. Now, I know many will ask, why not go with Inquisitor instead, which I suppose is the more lore thematically appropriate character for Aeon. The one I usually see people requesting is Judge. It is true that Judge gets a lot of nice unique bonuses. Judgment Aura lets you share your judgment effects with your allies. Sentence can add a very nice party-wide boost to damage, and even ignore concealment later on. Plus, you can also get a pet from the animal domain, as Inquisitors do get domains, but yours would only come at level 4. And just like Hunters, they are also spontaneous divine casters, but they have more cleric spells, while Hunter has nature spells. Here's why I prefer Divine Hound overall. It's mostly a matter of action economy. Note that activating your judgments costs a swift action, and swift actions, unlike free actions, they are limited to just 1 per round. So you already need a single swift action to activate judgments. To share your judgments with your party members, you need yet another swift action, and then to sentence the enemies a 3rd swift action. Like I said, they are limited to just once per round, and I just don't see it working well because it takes too long, in my humble opinion. By the 2nd round, the enemies are already toast when you consider all of the powers you get from an Aeon and your judgments. I'd much rather have the judgment automatically applied to my pets, because that will only cost a single swift action. I also prefer the Hunter nature spell list, because the reality is, the divine spells like Divine Favor, Shield of Faith, even Divine Power, they are already part of the generic Aeon spell list, so your Hunter will still be able to get them. Lastly, the Judge does not have any free teamwork feat, which is kinda annoying in my humble opinion. And he doesn't automatically share it with his pet as well. I mean, you can certainly go with another Inquisitor if you prefer, or even just a Judge. But to me, Hunter and Divine Hound is the way to go, especially for early game power, which is what I think matters the most. I do enjoy my builds to be as powerful as they can be as early as possible. That's where the fun comes into play if you're starting a new run. For race, you can truly go with anything you want. As always, I prefer humans when it comes to an extra feat for the early levels. But at the end levels, you have like 1 to 2 extra feet, so human isn't as needed. Background is the usual street urchin and pickpocket, as Hunters, unlike Inquisitors, have martial weapons proficiency for free. For ability score allocation, strength should be your main stat, we want 19 at character creation. Wisdom 14 is more than enough. Our spells are mostly for buffing, not really for DC and offensive spells and so on. The rest you can get through headbands of wisdom. 14 constitution as usual for some nice hit points. I find 12 dexterity more than enough. As always, because intelligence and charisma don't really matter for you, you can always dump them to get 14 starting dexterity, or even dump wisdom to 12 and get the rest through headbands. Now, as far as skill points, athletics of course, because you're going with high strength. Perception is neat too, since it is a class skill and we have decent wisdom. The same for lore nature, we even get a higher bonus to it from nature sense by being a hunter. For the last points, use magic device can be very useful for a hunter, especially if you have the latest DLC, the Treasure of the Midnight Isles, because just at chapter 3, your character will have access to pretty much the best scrolls in the game. You can easily buy them Some scrolls like Transformation can make a big difference for a hunter who is a medium base attack bonus character. We have an extra skill point because we went human, you can put this anywhere you want. Now for our level 1 feats, the usual package for two-handed characters. So power attack and cleave. The beauty about cleave is that it lets you have 2 attacks just at level 1. It doesn't get any better than that. Because by default, as a hunter, you only get your second attack at level 8. Now for the pet, amusingly enough, while Divide Hounds are limited, they get exactly the best pets in the game, the dog and the wolf. You can pick anything you prefer. I like the dog because you know it's man's best friend. Now as far as spells, early game I really like going with Cure Light Wounds for healing. And besides that, Delay Poison. Hunters are actually unique in that they get Delay Poison the earliest of all spellcasting classes, even earlier than clerics. And even at the start of the game, you already meet some annoying poisonous enemies. For deity, any that fits the Aeon's lawful alignment. I like going with a Rust too, but you can also pick any other. Then for alignment, either lawful good or lawful neutral. Now at level 2, be sure to pick out flank of course. And then Lead Blades. This spell can increase your weapon damage by 1 extra size, and it will even stack with enlarged and legendary proportions later on. For level 3 as usual, Cleaving Finish, so we can have potentially 3 attacks just at the early levels. Now we also get our first free teamwork feat. Well, besides Outflank. This can go in a number of different ways. Coordinated Maneuvers is a nice choice if you want to increase the chance of your pet stripping the enemy by an extra +2. Shake It Off is great for increasing your saving throws because your character will fight either riding your pet or close to it at the early levels. That means always a +2 to both your saving scores and even more if other characters have it. I know I've stayed away from Shake It Off for most of my normal, companion and character builds and so on, but we get it for free as a Divine Hound, so why not? For another spell, I actually like Acid Maw. This can add acid damage to your pet's bite attacks, so all of them. And while it is true that demons can easily avoid this extra damage, a lot of human enemies cannot. And amusingly enough, the damage source is treated as if coming from your own character, which opens up synergy for some feats and so on. At level 4, increase strength, which is also what you should increase on all of the other levels. For your first level 2 spells, Lesser Restoration, always amazing for spontaneous casters, even at the early game. And then I would go for Bow Strength, one of the best buffs for most of the early game melee characters, including pets. For a level 5 feat, I'd go with Combat Reflexes, mostly because even if you don't have high critical range early game, both our pet and our character already have the Outflank feat. Then I'd go for Cat's Grace here, another very powerful way of increasing your pet's armor class for tanking purposes early game. For a second free teamwork feat at level 6, well, this is when I would pick Coordinated Maneuvers. And then be sure to get Sense Vitals here, an amazing spell that can grant sneak attack for free for all of your Aeon attacks. For your level 7 feat, we don't need Outflank for once. I would actually go with Improved Initiative. Honestly, the more I play through the game, the more I realize how much initiative is important. For another level 1 spell, Unbreakable Heart, at this point we are very close to the Vescavor Swarm area, and those annoying little enemies have confusion auras. For our first level 3 spells, Greater Magic Fang, so we won't have to rely on natural attack enhancing amulets for most of the game. And the other one is up to you. I like Protection from Energy Communal. It can be nice to have on a spontaneous caster, especially for the very annoying dragon ambushes at chapter 3. And then you might as well pick Resist Energy Communal now. At level 9, go for Weapon Focus, and well, you have a few different choices now. I'm going with Great Access. Yes, I know another Gravesinger build, but what can I say, it is the ultimate weapon in the game by far. However, please remember you can always go with another high critical range weapon too, such as Falchion, Scimitar, Rapier, Kukris as well. The thing is, they will not be able to do as much damage as the Gravesinger Great Axe. I'll be blunt, your other teamwork feats kinda don't matter that much. Seize the Moment, I've got a lot of questions as to why I don't pick it anymore. It's because the consensus is that now it won't stack with Outflank. And Outflank just has better bonuses overall because it increases your attack rolls too. Back to Back is the one I would pick here, if only to increase your pet's armor class when tanking. You might as well go with something like Feather Step Mass here. For another level 2 spell, they kinda don't matter. I suppose you might as well pick Natural Rhythm if you want to buff your pets before boss encounters. Now for your first level 4 spells, Echolocation is always a must-have. It lets you bypass any concealment regardless of not having blind fight. Besides that, I would also go with Inspiring Recovery, especially if you are on Unfair. For a level 11 feat, as always, Improved Critical and then your weapon of choice. Your other level 1 spell can be anything. I pick Long Strider just to increase my movement speed. And then Freedom of Movement. Your level 12 free teamwork feat can be anything you want. Might as well pick Coordinated Defense. And then I would go for Animal Growth here. The only reason is that sadly Aeons lose Camellia at chapter 5. And she's the one that casts Animal Growth. This is just for when she leaves. But of course, if you didn't have Camellia, then you might as well pick Animal Growth as early as you can. For a level 13 feat, you'll get started on our Shattered Defenses package. I know most of my builds have it, what can I say, just like the Gravesinger X, it's simply optimal. Nothing will compare to having Dazzling Display and Shattered Defenses, it's a very powerful effect. You can pick anything here, like Greater Chameleon Stride, for some concealment on your character. As far as your first level 5 spell, Death Ward is always great as a spontaneous caster, and the other one can be anything. The same for any other level 2 spell here, like Effortless Armor. Your level 15 feat, as always, is a must. Shattered Defenses at last. Writing Time for the Frightful Aspect spell to easily proc this. And then anything truly goes here. You might as well pick Allied Spellcaster, even if it doesn't have that many benefits for you. Any level 5 spell, it doesn't matter. Any other level 4 spell too. Might as well pick something like Blessing of the Salamander for the small regeneration effect. Now, for your first level 6 spells, they kinda don't matter in the grand scheme, but I would consider going with Mass Cast Grace, since I don't use Naniel, who is pretty much the only other character that can cast this, besides Social if you pick certain domains. I'd go for Mass All's Wisdom, only because Cam leaves us, and she's the one that usually casts these buffs. Now from level 17 onwards, you are at a crossroads and free to multiclass now. The reason is we truly already have almost everything we could want from Divine Hound. The class I like to pick now is Ranger and Demon Slayer, always a nice dip. Since we get favorite enemy against all of the demons for a +2 to damage and AB, and this is even shared to your pet. Plus it's also a high base attack bonus class. For level 17 feat, since we are moving away from a pet class, you truly want your pet to be as powerful as possible because of how much they can carry you. For level 18, I'd recommend the classic Alchemist and Vivisectionist dip for more sneak attack and most importantly the mutagen. Higher strength is always welcome for our build, especially because it even increases the DC of our Aeon GAZES. Your alchemist spells don't really matter overall, mostly shield and true strike. Now, from level 19 to 12, I would actually keep progression to Vivisectionist, if only so we can get the medical discovery, which can go a number of different ways, even as an extra feat, and an extra sneak attack dice. Plus, also to increase the duration of our mutagen. By default, it only lasts 10 minutes with a single class level, which you know is not that much, at least not for dungeons, especially for the end game when you get this. 20 and 30 minutes though, they can now truly last even for the longest of dungeons. Your level 19 feat can go a number of different ways. We kinda ran out of the best feats by now, but something unique you can do as an Aeon, because they have the ultimate dispelling spell in the game, Zero State, what we can do at this point is pick Meta Magic and Selective Spell. Otherwise, you might as well go with a complete sneak attacker. And honestly, that's pretty much it. The other feats don't make that much of a difference. You might go with Improved Critical and Bite, depending on how many bite attacks you are stacking. Anyways, I'll go for Selective, just for the extra synergy. Now, for your Vivisectionist Discovery, you can pick Combat Trick and then a feat of choice. Feral Mutagen for an extra bite attack, or Infusion to cast the very small amount of Vivisectionist spells you have on allies. And then for level 20, as I said, your last level into Vivisectionist. Alright, now let's talk Mythic progression for our Aeon. As I've already covered the best Aeon powers and so on in a previous section of this guide, I'll keep it simple for now. For your first ascension, Close to the Abyss is always the best for almost all melee characters. You really want the extra gore attack. And then of course, Everlasting Judgment. The ability to have unlimited uses for your judgments is super overpowered, considering you can stack up to +3. They are also applied to your pet. Now if you are on Unfair, you might consider going with Last Stand as early as you can instead. For Mythic rank 2 you have two choices, either Mythic Power Attack for as high damage as you can as early 2, or Mythic Improved Initiative for a faster character. If you are on Unfair, I'd prefer Improved Initiative, otherwise Mythic Power Attack. For Mythic level 3 the choice is very simple. Ever Ready. This will stack with your Aeon Gaze for attacks of opportunity, and the end result is simply one of the most powerful combos in the entire game. For your first gaze, definitely attack. For your Aeon generic spells, choose the good divine buffs that you don't get as a Hound, such as Divine Favor. For Mythic rank 4, as usual, Mythic Critical, and then your weapon of choice. Your other gazes you pick won't kinda matter until Mythic 6, since you can only keep a single one active anyways, which will always be attack, but you might as well already pick attacks of opportunity here. For Mythic level 5, there's always Last Stand earlier if you didn't pick it at Mythic rank 1, Mythic Charge if you have a Scald to provide pounds for you, but I'd rather pick Mythical Beast. As a hunter we are all about our pets too, so why not empower them as early as we can. And then the damage gaze here. For Mythic rank 6, either Mythic Power Attack or Mythic Initiative depending on which one you picked before. And then the Power of Law gaze. Honestly the other ones don't really matter for our character. For Mythic level 6, I'd personally pick Always a Chance, because failing on once is a pain. And I don't go with Power of Law. For my third gaze, as I said before, I go with damage. For your Mythic feat at 8, you kinda already have the best ones. You can go with Mythic Sneak Attacker. Mythic Weapon Focus would just grant you an extra +1 to AB, as an A only have more than enough. Flawless attacks doesn't really make that much of a difference, considering all our AB boosts. I'd consider extra Mythic ability, and something like Mythic Charge if you have a Scald. Even Unrelenting Assault can help. The Abundant Casting Line won't do much for you. I just go for Last Stand here since I didn't pick it before. Though I actually forgot to mention the Temporal Jump in Gaze Power because it comes later than all of the other ones. The issue is it's kinda underwhelming. Once per round, if your ally misses an attack, they reroll and keep the best result. The problem is, it's just once per round. Perhaps for unfair where AB trumps damage by far. As for Mythic level 9, if you picked Selective Spell at level 19, then favorite Metamagic and Selective here. As far as Mythic rank 10, you can truly go with anything you want, including even stuff like Flawless Attacks or an extra Mythic ability. Alright, now let's talk gear for our Aeon Divine Hound build. For the amulet, as usual, Velexis is by far the best. You really want to stack as high strength as possible, not only for attack bonus damage, and of course, increase the chances of your Aeon Gaze debuffs working. Feel free to go with amulets that increase initiative before you can get Velexius. For the armor slot, the reality is armor doesn't really matter for us that much. Early game we have reach weapons, and starting from level 7 we can just ride our pet. I just go with armor that I think has the best passives, and to me the Chainmail of Camaraderie is quite powerful at that. You can get it very early, even at chapter 2, and it can grant you up to +4 damage against flanked creatures. The clothing or robe slot also doesn't really matter. I have the Happy Traveler shirt here, but you can go with the Cloth of Heavy Fortification as well, just for the 75% chance of negating critical hits and sneak attack damage. And there's always the Robe of the Seven Sins, mostly to increase your Aeon caster level. When it comes to belts, at the start belts that increase strength, later strength and constitution, and ultimately belts of physical perfection for +6 to all stats. After all, we are the main character. For the glove slot, since we are going with a two-handed weapon, Fencer's Gift can add extra damage. But if you'd rather leave it for a dual-wielding party member, you can also go with the Gloves of Phlebotomy, or later on the Gloves of the Death Dealer when you get sneak attack. For the boots, I just have the Expedition boots here because of the super high increase to your athletic skill. I'd much rather leave Ronak's Sacrifice to a character that is actually focused on dexterity, like Wojif. If you have a Scald and you like charging, then you can also go with the Boots of Stampede. After all, we do have very high athletics. For the helmet slot, at the start had Bands of Wisdom, but you can also go with the Windmaster helmet, which grants you a +4 to initiative. As we do start with 14 Wisdom, which is enough to cast most of the Hunter spells until the end game. Ultimately, I'd certainly go with the Hat of the Bitter End, which you can get from the latest DLC, the Treasure of the Midnight Isles, as the +2 stacking bonus to attack rolls on kill is super powerful. For the glasses slots, ultimately I would go with Broken Trickster, as it gives you a +6 enhancement to Wisdom and Charisma. This way we can leave the Hat slot for the Hat of the Bitter End, as we already get Wisdom from our glasses. And don't forget, Aeons have the Lenses of Prolonged Gaze, a unique glasses that increases the number of your gazes by 3 times per day. You can get it at the end of the Midnight Fane, so just in time for chapter 4. As your gazes eventually become perpetual anyways, you might as well go for the Broken Trickster glasses at Mythic rank 8. For the Cloak slot, early on you want Cloaks of Resistance. However, at around chapter 4 you definitely want to upgrade for the Aeon Mythic Cloak. As a matter of fact, I dare say this is probably the strongest variant of the Mythic Cloaks in the game, all of them. It comes with a slow aura on your character, which doesn't really matter, but here's the super overpowered part. First, it gives permanent haste to all of your party members, during battle, and haste is as always OP, especially since you wouldn't be able to extend it to 24 hours duration without being a merged lich. Second, your whole party, and yes your Aeon as well, will also get a +4 insight bonus to attack rolls, saving throws, and even skill checks. There are really no words to say how powerful this is overall. When you combine this with the Aeon attack gaze and attacks of opportunity one as well, you basically have enough AB bonuses to defeat everything. I suppose the only downside is that your characters will not be hasted outside of battle, so you kinda lose out on the extra movement speed. For the ring slot, the Ring of Imminent Demise is always a must-have for two-handed characters. Lastly, I also really like the Ring of Guiding Star for even higher initiative to our Aeon. For the braces slot, it doesn't really matter much for most of the game. You can always go with stuff like the Braces of Breaching or the Braces of Dominance early on. Eventually I just settle for the Braces of Abruptum slot because it increases our sneak attack damage. Now let us talk about the best weapons and quick slots for our Aeon. For the early game, you definitely want to focus on Glaives or Bardicious, that is, during Chapter 1, because they are reach weapons. At Chapter 2 you can already ride your pet, and I'd highly consider you go with the Wide Sweep Sight instead. Now from Chapter 3 onwards is when I would recommend you go with the Gravesinger Great Axe for the super high critical range and also critical damage at the same time. As far as quick slots, they kinda don't matter much for us, but here's the ones I like. The Covenant of the Inheritor is always the must-have for any character build possible, for how much it gives you the ability to easily bypass Demon's damage reduction for your whole party permanently. Is simply too good. The Lucky Dice can help, as it can give you a +1 varied luck bonus, a lesser extend or a normal extend metamagic rod to increase the duration of some of your powerful Aeon buffs such as Perfect Prediction, most importantly Edict of Impenetrable Fortress. A greater Quicken metamagic rod, although a normal Quicken will work just fine too, because the reality is the best Aeon spells they usually cast already as 5th actions. There's always the Signet of House Vespertilio to increase any skill of choice you want, and the Old Grimoire can add a lot of extra casts for your useful level 1, 2 and 3 hunter spells. Well, alright friends, so this was it from my Aeon Mythic Path guide. If you found it useful, please remember to like, subscribe, and even consider becoming a channel member for some nice exclusive content, and to support the channel if you can. I'll definitely work on releasing the remaining Mythic Paths guide now, such as Legend, which is definitely the upcoming one. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.